Shalom. Hello, welcome friends. My name is Sharon Clevenger, Rabbi Sharon Clevenger, and I am voting yes on 3. I'm proud to say that I'm in my 15th year of TDE membership. For 5 years, I served this community as one of its rabbis. So this is my first time speaking from this bima, and I'm a little full. When I left to become the middle school rabbi at Hirashi School, where I serve now, I continued my membership here because this is my lifelong Jewish home. I stand here proudly representing Rabbi Sissenwein, Sapphire, and Sherman, and Cantors Suffrant and Zell, because none of them could be here tonight, and because I care so much. Rabbi Sissenwein especially asked that I share with you that there are few places that feel as important as this place at this moment. He ardently supports the rights of transgender people, like all people, to equal protection here in Massachusetts and throughout the world. He is in Israel, meeting with none other than Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, so we can understand where else is important. Though not in body, Rabbi Sissenwein and his whole team are 100% with us here in spirit, in action, and most importantly, in votes. I speak on their behalf when I welcome all of you from an extraordinary array of religious and secular institutions in the area and well beyond to this night of learning, listening, and planning for action. When I first learned that question 3 had made it to the Massachusetts ballot, I was in shock. How could Massachusetts, this bastion of liberal humanitarian ideals, even have enough people to get this on the ballot? I truly believe, and the research backs me up, that many of the people who got this ugly question on the ballot have one thing in common. And it's not negative experiences in bathrooms or locker rooms. It's that they don't know or realize that they know any transgender people. As you know, when we actually meet the people whom we think are so different from us, whether we are cisgender and they are transgender, whether we are Jewish and they are Christian, we are female, they are male, etc. When we really know them, their stories become our stories, and our eyes are opened. So a story. 17 years ago, I was the brand new student rabbi at Congregation Beth Chaim Chadashim, the world's first LGBT synagogue. It was lunchtime on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and I sat down with 2 women, clearly a couple. As we chatted, they called their son over to introduce us, and their son looked remarkably like both of them. And thinking what I know about biology, I wondered what their story was, but I knew better than to ask. But fortunately, these women took their roles as my teachers, which they were, very seriously. And so they asked with a playful glint in their eye, "Are you wondering which one of us is the mother?" "Yes," I admitted. "Your son looks so much like each of you." And one mom said, "I was his father, and my wife is his mother, and now I'm his other mother." As simple as that, the story of what I'm sure was a long journey of self-discovery, probably struggle, and ultimately acceptance, became the happy ending of 2 women and their adorable son on the Jewish New Year. Now, I never would have guessed that one woman was trans, nor was it my job to guess. All I saw then, and all I see today, are people living their best lives in the most meaningful ways they can. And while I would never suggest that we gloss over our identities as rich and thickly layered and often challenging as they are, I truly believe that we have far more in common with one another than what sets us apart. Since we're in temple, a little Torah. This week, Jews throughout the world are reading the section of the Torah beginning in Genesis chapter 12 called Lech Lecha. It's the start of Abraham's story, and I want to focus on the first two words, Lech Lecha. If you open most Bibles in English, they'll translate Lech Lecha as go forth. And the tricky thing is, you can say go forth by just saying Lech. The Lecha means to yourself. So Lech Lecha technically means go forth to yourself. Right now we are prepared to listen, learn, and ultimately fight for the rights of transgender people here in Massachusetts and really throughout the country as we lead by example. We must ask ourselves and our neighbors to Lech Lecha, to go forth to ourselves or to look within. What do we see within ourselves? Do we see love or do we see hate? Do we see acceptance or do we see rejection? Do we see action or do we see inaction? And finally, can we see the possibility that transgender people could be our family members, our neighbors, our friends? Lech Lecha, everyone. Go forth to yourselves and together and make our world the world that it should be. Shalom and thank you. And I want to invite Irene Flint, who brought the idea forward that this should happen in this town, to tell us what's happening next. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Irene Flint. I'm a longtime member of both the League of Women Voters of Wellesley and the Unitarian Universalist Society of Wellesley Hills. The idea for this evening's conversation originated from a similar community event which I attended in Needham. I went to that meeting to find out more about the ballot question and how to vote on it. But I came away deeply moved by the stories I heard from transgendered women and the mother of two transgendered children. I had a clearer idea of why it was important to retain this legislation, not just because it is a civil right, but because of the effect it has on people's lives. And because of the confusing language of that question, how important it is to educate voters. After almost 50 years as a League of Women Voters member, I knew how to do that and who to call on. So here we are. So tonight's program is being recorded by Wellesley Media. It will be rebroadcast several times between now and then. It will also be on the League's website probably in about a week. As noted in your program, we have three goals tonight. First, to present an opportunity to greater understanding of non-binary, genderqueer, and transgender individuals. Second, to look at current legal protections under Massachusetts non-discrimination laws. And third, to understand how your vote on question 3 in November could either uphold or curtail these rights for transgender people. We will begin with a panel discussion moderated by the President of the World of Wellesley, Michelle Chalmers. After that, we'll open up the discussion for questions from the audience to the 4 panel members. Following the questions and answers, there will be a call to action by Ann Mara-Lanza and closing remarks by Reverend Dr. Kelly Murphy Mason, Senior Minister from the Unitarian Universalist Society of Wellesley Hills. Many people have worked diligently to bring this evening together. You met several of our volunteers when you checked in and enjoyed the multiple refreshments they brought. Several members of the League of Women Voters who are here to register citizens who aren't yet registered to vote. We also have 2 League members serving as very efficient timers this evening. The main planning group that started working together in July is made up of myself, Ann Mara-Lanza, Michelle Chalmers, C.C. Hansen, all of whom are speaking this evening, and Jacqueline Maxwell, a Wellesley High School English teacher who has been, among other things, our liaison with the Wellesley schools. There's a long list of sponsors on your program, which includes not only the Temple, the Unitarian Universalists, the Wellesley League Women Voters, and the World of Wellesley, but also St. Andrews, the Village Church, Wellesley Friends Meeting, and the Wellesley Hills Congregational Church. In addition, we are supported by the Wellesley Democratic Town Committee, Out Metro West, Keshet, and Freedom for All, Massachusetts. So I thank you all for joining us this evening, and I'm now going to turn the evening over to Michelle Chambliss.
Thank you, Irene. Okay, excellent. So now I am very excited to introduce our panel to you tonight. We are very thankful to have each and every one of you here this evening. This is a special gift to hear from you this evening. And so, as Irene said, I will introduce everyone, and then we will start one by one, starting with Cece for about 10 minutes each. And we do have our timekeepers here who are sitting right here in front of us, who will keep us on point. I know it's really hard, but we'll do our best. And thank you again so much for coming, and thank you all for coming and being here this evening to hear some important stories, and we're hoping for an engaging conversation, and we're excited for it to begin. So to my right, we have Cynthia Hansen, or Cece, who is a longtime Wellesley resident, a transgender woman, parent of 2 sons, and active member of the Wellesley Village Church. And we have Sawyer Bethel. Sawyer is the executive director of Out Metro West, has spent their careers supporting and advocating for underserved youth. They received their MSW from Boston College, and then worked with children, adolescents, and young adults in a variety of settings, including outreach, group homes, and intensive foster care. Having grown up butch and genderqueer in a Southern military family, they are committed to building community for all LGBTQ plus youth. Thank you, Beth. Or sorry, I apologize. We have Mimi Mickner. She is a 5th-year rabbinical student at Hebrew College in Boston and is Kishnet's advocacy and campaigns specialist and rabbinic intern. Kishnet is a national organization that works for full LGBTQ equality and inclusion in Jewish life. Welcome, Mimi. And Rabbi Mike Moskowitz. He is a scholar in residence for trans and queer Jewish studies at Congregational Beit Simchat Torah. He is a deeply traditional and radically progressive advocate for trans rights and LGBT inclusivity. His work on behalf of trans rights began while he served as a rabbi of the Old Broadway Synagogue in Harlem of the Aish New York rabbi at Columbia University. And on our program, you can see where his writings can be found at RabbiMikeMoskowitz.com. So thank you all, and we'll start with Cece.
Thank you, Jill. Very quickly, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. This is a very special event for me. I want to thank you for hosting.
Closer to your house, to your house. Treat it like an ice cream cone.
Hello? So thank you all for coming, and so not to be repetitive, let me just jump right in. I have been a Wellesley resident for about 45 years. I went to Sprague School, I went to Phillips School, I went to Kingsbury School, and it seems like I went to every school that turned into a condo. Middle school, which was junior high, and then high school. And in high school, I met my best friend, had two really great sons, Aaron and Rick, and they both went to Upham and middle school and high school. And so our roots are pretty deeply rooted here. My mom is here, and they have lived in Wellesley forever. So when I was asked to participate on the committee, I really had only one request, and that was that we have an open conversation. I don't want to be one-sided. I want to hear anyone's question as hard as they think it might be, because as you look at political issues, they can oftentimes be very polarized. And I think this is a human rights issue, and I think what we need is a solution. And solutions are long-term. And polarizing long-term solutions just doesn't really work that great. So over the past 4 years, I've spoken at a few churches. I've spoken at youth groups. I've trained a prison in Northampton, the guards and prisoners. That was quite an interesting experience. And what I wanted to do tonight, to kind of kick things off, was to share with you what I think are some pretty cool questions that people had. Because ideally that's really what we want to do, is to address the questions. So I've started off by writing down and then kind of categorizing the questions, and I'll give you a little bit of stories relative to, what it meant to me. So here we go. How did I know I was trans? Was there a moment or experience that heightened my awareness of being trans? I kind of call these self-recognition questions. Moving on, when and how did I come out as transgender? How did I think love or relationships impact transitioning? What are my thoughts on the ethics of transitioning while in a long-term relationship? Then in transitioning, when and what timeline did I transition? Did I wish I did it sooner? How did I get through it? Was it hard? How much support and where did I receive it from? And then, you saved the best one for last, because it was asked of me with one of my son's friends. When I was transitioning, he would bring his friends over from high school, and I wasn't out yet to the community, but I was out to him, and I was out to his friends. So whenever they came over, I said, do you have any questions? Do you have anything you want to ask? And one young man who I give him a lot of credit for his honesty, he said basically, well, what's up with that? And he said, that is probably the best question I've ever heard, because it's just so broad. So I'm gonna go back and tell you a story about when I realized that I was different. And it was about when I was 7 years old. I was playing baseball. I played a lot of baseball. And a good friend of mine, his name is Clark. And the coach used to hit baseballs out to us, and we'd stand out there and catch them sometimes. And the big game with him was, if you catch it, you had to think of somebody you wanted to be when you grew up. And so we both caught it, and I said, well, who did you pick? And he said, Lee Majors, of course, this is been going in. And I said, Farrah Fawcett. And I just couldn't get why he wanted to be Lee Majors. And, I was like, what's with you? And he said, well, I get to, spend time with her and, be her boyfriend. And I said, well, when you're all done with that, I get to go home and be her. It didn't really make any sense to me, but it did give me the inkling that my thought processes were different than most. And then when I hit puberty, it became a lot more apparent that there was something else that was going on. And we can talk about that in a little bit, but that was really my first experience as figuring out when I was different. Doesn't mean that's when I realized I was transgender. I just realized that I knew that I wanted to be somebody other than that. And I'll skip to what I think today. You know, if someone were to ask me today, who would I want to be? The answer is me. And so I think that's a really big distinction relative to, you know, how I used to think. And when you want to be you, it's amazing what happens to yourself and the people around you. You contribute more, you understand people better, etc. So I think that was a really big lesson that I learned. Coming out was actually pretty interesting. I actually wrote two narratives. One was for me, you know, what I'm going to tell my family, and the other was, I am so excited to be able to finally figure out and tell everyone, you know, who I am. And I picked the happy one, which I think was the right choice. And I would recommend it to everyone. The first person I spoke to about it was my sister, Janine. And she is one of the coolest sisters I only had. So when I came out to her, she asked me two questions. And she said, well, are you on hormones? And I said, well, yes, I am. And she said, take off your shirt. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, I want to see. So immediately, she just gave me immediate recognition. And I said, I have got a really great sister here. I then told my mom, and my mom at first, I think, thought that she did something wrong, and that was just not what I wanted, you know, my mom to think, because my mom's the best mom in the world. And I think the funniest one was when I told my father, because I literally sat him down for 20 minutes, and my mom was in the kitchen, peering around the corner to see how he was going to react. And after 15 minutes, he stopped and said, okay, I don't understand. What are you trying to tell me? and I was like, okay, this is going to be great. As far as in the community, Village Church was probably the greatest entity for me. I wish I had brought a copy of a letter that they wrote, but about 3 years ago, they wrote a letter to the congregation introducing me and my kids. And it was really great, because by the time that I actually came out, I think half the people there knew, and it was more like a party than it was anything else. And that's a really good thing to keep in mind, is community can be really helpful to people that want to come out, and I highly suggest it. On transitioning, where did I receive my support? I immediately went to one of the facilities in Wellesley, Studios Fitness and Dance. It's a women's club. There's 200 women members only, and I fit right in, and I'm friends with everyone there. I've been in the locker rooms, I've been everywhere, and no one has any problems. I think one of the coolest things is there's a woman that I've known forever. She knew me when I was young. She knew my ex and my friend Raycliffe, and she has been so accepting there, and it's just been a wonderful experience. And I kind of want to end with the what's up with that, because I think it's kind of important, because as I went through all of the changes that I went through, when I started taking the hormones, I didn't assume my physiology would change. I just assumed, okay, I'm going to stop now, and there's time afterwards for some Q&A, but I very much appreciate everyone being here. This is a great opportunity to hear things, and I look forward to further conversations.
Thank you, Susan. I know the timing is so difficult, but thank you so much. Well, the Wellesley will definitely, we are going to have another event we want to hear more from Susie, yes. So thank you. Sawyer.
Hi, so my name is Sawyer Bethel. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, which might be different for some folks. and we'll kind of get into that a little bit later. But I also want to echo Cece's appreciation for this community and being able to have this conversation and putting faces to a bill that can really affect a lot of different people, not just trans people and not just gender nonconforming people, but cisgender people as well. So just kind of wanted to put that out there and say thank you, just because I think it's really important. So, kind of, I guess, like, my story, right? I've thought about this long and hard, and I've presented my story in a variety of different ways, and it's hard because I'm like, well, what did I say last time? Is it going to be the same? And I always think it is. It's always going to be the same, right? So I am 36 years old. I am an only child of only children. So both of my parents are only children. And then I'm an only child. So my family is very tiny. And I also grew up Catholic. My mother was very devout Catholic. She went to Catholic school, Catholic high school, Catholic college, the whole 9 yards. My dad, I don't actually know what his faith is. I think he was Episcopal, maybe? Sure, we'll say that. But I grew up in the Catholic Church. And also, kind of some other historical kind of background information of where I'm coming from. My father was in the Navy. He was also a police officer. And my mother was an educator and administrator of schools. And also, the bigger piece of it too is that my family is deeply Southern. So, with a capital S there too. In terms of ideals, in terms of how they feel about different people, how they feel about their politics. Very, very Southern, very, very conservative. Not necessarily outwardly, like we didn't have a Confederate flag flying in our yard, but I was definitely brought up with it's history, it's not hate. That's what I was given as a monologue about the Confederate flag. And believe that, honestly, and I will be fully honest, I believed that until I learned different. And by learning different, that meant I went to college in Macon, Georgia, and then moved up here in 2004 to get my master's in social work at BC, and I never wanted to go back home. So I stayed. So now Boston has been the place that I've lived the longest. I've moved all over. So that's just kind of historical, kind of who I am in terms of my family context. So personally, I identify as genderqueer, and I think there might be a feeling in the room, and I don't know because usually there is, that there's a discomfort with the word queer, and I love it. I love that word. I think it's really great. I'm so glad that my community is reclaiming that word and saying, this is something that really defines me, and it really does. And I figured out that I was genderqueer actually in college, so around 2001-ish. I had come out I actually first came out as bi to my mom because that was going to be way easier. It was actually not as easy, and it got really uncomfortable really quickly. And then came out as gay later on. I actually lied to my father because he asked me for about 2 years while I was in college if I was gay, and I was like, no. So straight, so straight. I wish that I could kind of give, and I've done my story at schools, and usually I have like this PowerPoint kind of thing, because I'm a nerd, and I love like the actual like video pieces and the pictures, but if you look at me as a kid, you knew I wasn't straight. There was just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I was definitely a tomboy. I played sports. I always played with boys, never played with girls. Blue was my favorite color, all of those stereotypical kind of things. But once I kind of grew up and was out of my parents' home and realized that I could be something different than a card-carrying Republican white person growing up in the South, I was like, oh, I can do something different. I can actually think for myself and do things for myself. And I realized, with really getting in touch with my body and my mind, that things just didn't match. I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. And I think I can't really come up with another kind of analogy for that unless when you go home, right, you're really comfortable, and then you get to put on your sweatpants, and you're just like, yes, this is great. I can have my nighttime tea or whatever. You feel so comfortable and so at home. That's what being home in your body feels like. And I never felt that for so long, so for forever. So I was like, I don't want to be a boy. I don't think I'm a boy. But being a girl doesn't fit either. And well, now I'm just weird. I just thought I was really weird, and that I was wrong, and that my thought patterns were really terrible. And I also thought that I was going to hell. So there was that piece too. So I figured out that there was this term genderqueer, and it was literally like a light bulb went off. The choir was singing behind me. It was amazing and incredible. So I was like, oh my gosh, there's something that can define me. That I reject the binary. I don't think that there are just men and that there are just women in this world. I think that that's really untrue. My mom was the one that loved sports and gave me my love of antique cars, and she was like, you can do, girls can do anything. I was like on a little plaque in my room. She taught me how to have a nice firm handshake, to not take no for an answer, and stick up for myself, which would be stereotypically what boys are taught. But my mom was like, nope, we're going to teach you to do whatever you want to do, you can do it. So I was given that freedom to do that, but I was within the context of still being female and still being a woman. And it just didn't fit. I can't explain it better than that, but it just didn't fit. And I also, at this point, I had been binding my chest. So what that means is that, I hit puberty really, really late, and let's just say puberty is terrible for everybody, and it's especially terrible for transgender and non-conforming folks because it throws everything out of whack. And so I bound my chest for about 15 years. I had top surgery about 3 years ago, and it's quite possibly the best thing that's ever happened to me. But I had to wait 15 years to be able to do that because my health insurance wouldn't cover it. Whereas when I was 18 and I had breast reduction, my insurance covered it. It's interesting, right? And I got a new job. I was working with queer youth before I became executive director of Metro West. And my previous employer actually had an exclusionary policy that they would not cover any sort of transition-related medical expenses whatsoever. I don't know about you, but social workers, they don't make a lot of money. I didn't have just like $10,000 to $15,000 just hanging out to be able to show up to have this really life-affirming surgery for me. But my insurance covered it, and it was great. It was fantastic, and I'm incredibly happy that I have it. But with that comes an incredible amount of pain. And I wouldn't change who I am in any way, shape, or form. I just wish I had known earlier. I wish I had known that I could really be whoever I wanted to be, whoever I felt that I could be, rather than living a life of pain and discomfort and confusion. I wish I had talked to my parents about it. My mom passed away about 7 years ago. And she knew I identified as genderqueer, but still wanted me to wear a dress to my best friend's wedding, which would have been awful. And my dad knows. My dad actually knows that I go by Sawyer, but he, went to go back to this past August, and last August, excuse me, that he has refused and has said, I will never call you Sawyer, ever. You will always be my birth name. And, it is what it is. It's unfortunate. And it's unfortunate that my dad doesn't get to know me as who I am. And that's kind of, unfortunately, his loss. But it's my gain that I get to be exactly who I am all of the time in my job, in my personal life, in our relationships. And then hopefully, with this bill that's coming up, that I can continue to do that, right? Like continue to be exactly who I am and exactly who I want to be at all times. Thank you very much for letting me share my story.
Please take a deep breath. Thank you so much for sharing. I know it's so hard. It's an amazing gift. I really appreciate it.
Hi everyone, good evening. Thank you so much for having me and for having Keshet. My name is Mimi Nickner, and I am both the advocacy and campaign specialist as well as rabbinic intern at Keshet, spending most of my time working on the Yes on 3 campaign. I have been, though I would say in some ways the most important content of the panel has already been said, I have been tasked with giving a little bit of nuts and bolts about the ballot question and a little bit of background information about how we got here. And I'll speak a little bit to who we are at Keshet and what we do as well. So just to begin there a little bit with our organization, for about 20 years, we have been working for the full inclusion and equality of LGBTQ Jews in Jewish life. So what that means is that we work with Jewish institutions, synagogues like this, Jewish day schools, Hillels, things like this, which are sort of campus Jewish communities, to become places where LGBTQ Jews can sort of be fully themselves as LGBTQ Jews. We've also done a lot of work to build community for LGBTQ young adults and teens and parents of LGBTQ young Jews. So really what all this work has meant is that, people like me, I'm a sort of cisgendered queer woman. That means that, very simply, that the gender I was assigned at birth matches with the gender that I identify with now. We feel perfectly welcome to walk into many, many synagogues and be fully ourselves, which is such a gift, particularly for me as I pursue the rabbinate. But for us, I would say that Jewish community inclusion of LGBTQ folks is not a value that we think should stay within the Jewish community. It's not something that we believe we should just check at the door when we leave synagogue, when we leave our Jewish day schools, when we leave Hillels. We believe that we are obligated to live out the value of inclusion in the wider communities that we're part of as well. Now, we learn from Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cook that we should pray in places that have windows, like here. And the reason that we should do that is because what's outside of our synagogues, what's outside of our immediate communities should concern us. It should matter to us. So for that reason, we at Keshet not only work within the Jewish community, but we bring a Jewish voice and mobilize the Jewish community to be part of larger work for justice for LGBTQ people, no matter what faith, no matter what background. So for us, what we believe is that both for the sake of transgender Jews and gender nonconforming Jews, but for the sake of creating a society where all of us belong, where all of us are valued, where all of us are seen, and where all of us can be who we truly are, that we must vote yes on 3 to uphold the current anti-discrimination laws that exist. So, how did we get to this unfortunate reality where human dignity and full personhood is being put to vote? Here's what happened. In 2016, a supermajority in the State House, I'm talking Republicans, I'm talking Democrats, like really a bipartisan majority, signed into law a law that says that transgender folks, gender nonconforming folks cannot face discrimination in public places. We already had on the books laws that protected trans folks and gender nonconforming folks in schools, in places of work, but not in public places. So this was an innovation to the law. What this means is that under this law, discrimination against trans folks and against gender nonconforming folks is illegal in all public places, and of course, very significantly, in the restrooms and locker rooms in those places. So this means that folks have the right to use the restroom and locker room that matches the gender identity that they have. So more concretely, what this really means in day-to-day life is that a trans person, a gender non-conforming person, cannot be turned away from a movie theater, from a restaurant, from a hospital. That they can use these places that without fear of discrimination, or at least with knowing that the law is behind them in a case where discrimination does happen. Just imagine for a moment having to think twice about going to the grocery store, having to think twice about going for a jog in the park. This is something that us cisgender folks take for granted, for the most part. The law meant that trans folks and gender non-conforming folks could rest assured that the law was on their side in the case of any kind of incident of discrimination in these public places. Again, something that many of us cisgender folks take for granted. So this law has really changed the reality for many, many people, really for the better. Unfortunately, very soon after this law was passed in 2016, there was a group of folks who were opposed to these laws, really the same folks who were opposed to marriage equality and really any kind of LGBTQ progress. And they got enough signatures basically to get this question on the ballot that we're going to see in November, which is going to ask Massachusetts voters whether or not we want to uphold the current law that's in place. The hope, of course, of the folks who put it on the ballot is that Massachusetts voters will vote no and will repeal this law and reinstate discrimination into the law. They hope that people get confused by the wording of the question, which I believe is already mentioned in the introduction. It's very confusingly worded. And they hope that enough people will be scared by their main message, which is that bathrooms will be unsafe for women and girls, that they will vote no. And to be clear, their hope is not simply to repeal anti-discrimination laws for transgender people here in Massachusetts. They are very explicit in saying that their agenda is national. Their hope is to make an example of the state of Massachusetts and to say, if we can do this in Massachusetts, the bluest of blue of the states, we can do this anywhere. They are quoted as saying this in the press. They are not pretending. So we have to understand that if we lose, if us yes on 3 folks lose, this will lead to a wave of anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ legislation in states across the country. Not that that isn't already happening, but that will strengthen those efforts. So we need to understand the national scope of this. So that's why those of us in support of trans rights, allies like myself, everyone, must stand up and vote yes on 3 this November, and really urge others to do so. The race is surprisingly tight. Many of us would think, oh, we live in this lovely liberal state, which in many ways we do, but the race is very tight. The reason that the race is very tight is people are very convinced by this bathroom message that I articulated just a minute ago. Again, the way that the message is framed is that a man can wake up one morning and decide to be a woman and is entitled to enter a woman's restroom and assault a woman or a girl. Now, for those of us who have a good understanding, or at least I should say some understanding, of trans identity or the identity of being gender nonconforming, we should see that this is not true. That being said, the data also backs up that this is not really an issue. There was an independent study that came out very coincidentally at the same time that this campaign was going out. It actually was a coincidence, it was kind of amazing. It came out of UCLA Law School, I believe, that said no relationship between bathroom crimes and having gender non-discrimination laws. So the data does not support this to be true. So if folks ask you about that, that's what I would say. But back to the race being tight. So there is a poll that came out in the Boston Globe, I think it was a Mass Inc. poll, that said we were at about 70% in support of voting yes on 3. That obviously doesn't sound tight, but this is before the no on 3 folks have really released their ads full force on the radio, on TV, on the internet. And these are the kind of fear-mongering ads that I'm talking about the bathroom safety message. So we can expect support to drop slightly. This is exactly what happened in Houston when there was a city-level ordinance. Support went from 60% to about 39% after seeing these ads. So this is for real. So what that means is that those of us who are supportive of Yes on 3 have a lot of work to do to engage others to vote yes as well. It is not, unfortunately, enough for each of us to just say yes on 3 on the ballot. We must urge others to do so and talk to others to do so. I'll wrap up in just a second by saying that we at Keshet are doing some specific work to mobilize the Jewish community. If you were interested in hearing more about 2 opportunities, one is to sign a commitment card saying, yes, I will vote yes on 3. Or if you want to go door knocking with us on Sunday, November 4th, please come talk to me at the table outside. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. That was very helpful. And Rabbi Mike, whenever you're ready.
Good evening, my name is Mike. My pronouns are he, him. I identify as a straight, cis male. And as an ally, the most important thing to do is to listen. So thank you so much for sharing your stories. As the rabbi said, it's very easy to hate people and things that you've never experienced. And no one's life is ever hypothetical. And I think it's very easy to think about these things of what if there's a person, but that person does exist, and that person has a name, that person has a face, that person has a heart, and that person was created in the image of the divine. The most pronounced identity of any individual needs to be that of being created in the divine image. The voice that I have is one of a rabbinic voice, and I'm so happy to be on this panel and thank you for the invitation. I would like to share some of the insights from my faith tradition that I think help to provide a better outlook to the way in which we're meant to see this. The Talmud asks, in what way is God different from us? And it makes the observation that when we mass produce something like a coin, each one is minted and is identical to the one before and after. But when God made us all equally in God's image, we're all different. And in that way, says the Talmud, God is greater than we are. On a deeper level, what I think that means is that God's greatness is revealed in those differences. That we get to see the spectrum and the fluidity and the expansiveness of the divine when we can break the binary, when we can see below the physical, when we can see the spiritual being expressed through the physical. Our rabbis teach us that so much of these struggles that we feel aren't necessarily part of the human experience, but rather mimic the divine. The emptiness and void at the beginning of creation was God's emptiness and void. God wanted to be seen for who God is. God wanted to be understood. It's not good for us to be alone because we're created in the image of the divine. It's not good for God to be alone. It's perhaps for that reason that God made 7 billion different faces, because it gives God a better chance of being seen for who God is. The Talmud tells another story. A rabbinical student, not at Hebrew college, who is feeling really proud of himself that he's acquired much knowledge. So he's riding happily along home, ready to display his newly acquired erudition and show off. And God decides to teach this young rabbinic scholar a lesson. As he comes closer to a city, he encounters a person who looks very different from anyone he's ever seen. And instinctually, he says to this person, "Oh my gosh, are you ugly?" And then follows it with a second offensive question: Is everyone from your town as ugly as you are? The person pauses and says, "That's a really good question. Why don't you ask the Creator who formed me?" Immediately, this rabbinic student comes off of his horse, feels very ashamed. Rashi, the medieval commentator, says that this was Elijah the prophet who had come in this disguise to be able to teach this person a lesson. And he won't forgive him until he goes to his hometown, meets each person, and sees the unique aspect of the divine manifested in each individual. What's fascinating as an observation within the narrative of the Genesis story is that consistently separation is bad. When we separate the water, on that day it doesn't say that it was good, because separation is not good. The one thing we know about God is the unity of God. God is one. When God creates the plants, it's each according to their own species. When God creates the animals, it's each according to their own species. Every aspect, billions of trees, plants, and insects. And when it comes to creating humanity, there's only one person. Because there are not different types of humans. There's only one type of human. And that human is the one that's created in the image of the divine. When we create separation, we create division, we create darkness. I was a rabbi at Columbia University and of the Old Broadway Synagogue when someone in my family transitioned. I had never thought about gender before in my life since I was a kid and was told which bathroom to use. Getting to know and to see as many trans and gender non-conforming folks as I could, I learned that the space that I occupy around gender limits me. And it limits most cisgender folks from understanding what it means to be trans, and that's why we're not trans. If we could experience gender in that way, we could be aware of gender beyond the limitations. I had a student who was struggling at Columbia as a trans Jew, and the world was unhospitable to him. Thank God he's fine, but he motivated me to come out as an ally in a public way. And it was around the holiday of Hanukkah. This year will be 2 years. And I think that we now live in very dark and scary times. And if we look back to the Genesis story, God's response to that darkness was, or let there be light. We're taught in Psalms that God's candle is our soul. And so each one of us that has the agency, that has the privilege, that has the access to be a light in those spaces of darkness, we have to ask ourselves, where in that darkness do we want to stand? What do we want our candle to be? And there's a very special light. Like in the Jewish tradition, we deploy Saturday night, the Havdalah candle. It's a multi-wicked candle. Because when we live in such thick darkness, sometimes that feeling of isolation, of being alone, it's overwhelming. But when we can come together as a community like this, with such a powerful light, our rabbis point out that darkness doesn't exist independently. It's just the absence of light. And that's why a little bit of light dispels a lot of darkness. And so as we think about coming together as a community, I don't live in this state, but as an ally, I'm encouraging folks in this state to come together. There's something that we can feel, hopefully, as a spiritual practice, that we get to ally with God as we create a safe space for all of God's children. And as we think about our relationship with God, if we want to have a relationship with God as a parent, then we need to be able to love all of God's children as siblings. Thank you so very much, and thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Mike and Mimi, Sawyer, and Cece. Thank you so much for our amazing panel. Let's give them all one big round of applause. Excellent. So we're going to move to an opportunity to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening and for, again, being here tonight. So what we'd like to do is, I think when you came in, you were given a index card. So you can do either questions or comments standing up, and we have a microphone that'll go through the audience to be able to, so everyone can hear your question. Or if you'd like to, we'll just give you 2 minutes to write down your question on the index card, and we have Jacqueline who will come through and get the cards from you. And then, so we'd like to do, we have 20 minutes. Amber?
I don't know.
We have about 20 minutes to do some, to have some questions. So we'll read some from the cards, and then we'll also hear from you, and we'll give you a mic. And the questions can be directed to someone specific, if you want your question answered by someone specific, or we can just pass the mic through. Anyone that feels comfortable can answer the question. Some of the norms, just to be able to make sure that everyone can be heard who would like to tonight in terms of time. Try to just be cognizant of your comments and your questions, and just make sure that we have space for everyone, and obviously rooted all in humanity and respect, of course. And so we can give you just a second to pull up some of the cards, and if we have a microphone, someone that's going to be going through the audience, if anyone has a question for anyone. Okay, great. All right. So thank you, and I'll take the cards when you're ready. And we can start with our first question.
Thanks. This is for anyone. Why do you think questions 1 and 3 are so misleadingly worded that there are so many questions about them?
I think to deliberately confuse people so that they'll vote against their own values and interests.
Hi, thank you to everyone. This is a question for Cece. Hi. So my son Noah is one of Aaron's friends who hung out at your house. And I remember the evening when he came home and said, oh, by the way, Aaron's dad is a woman now. And what struck me, well, there were a number of things. It was sort of, okay. But there was a surprising ease in the way that he shared it. And what he related was a remarkable sort of ease from Aaron, a comfort, and also an incredible warmth and openness from you. And so I want to say that your sharing yourself in that way, maybe before it was public with everyone, but with Aaron's friends, with my son, was a gift. And I wanted to ask you, do you feel that maybe younger people just have move in a different space when it comes to these issues? Have you noticed the difference? And maybe I can put that, beyond just you, but I'm wondering, do you find that maybe there's a greater ease in accepting and understanding that variety doesn't come in two flavors?
Yeah, I actually do. I think kids today are a lot more open. When I was growing up, there was nothing out there. So now kids see that there's diversity. I was very open with Aaron, and Aaron, he's my youngest son. He spent a lot of time with Anthony. He helped, a lot of the kids, and he just wanted to understand. And the one thing I didn't want to do was have him bring friends over that got confused or what have you. I will say, I actually went and visited with probably 10 different families because I wanted to talk to the parents after their children saw me. And I came out first in the community and second in business. And I will say, I expected after I told one person to see my name on Facebook, and for 6 months, not one person said a word to anybody. And I am so impressed by the people of this community because I never would have expected that someone would keep a secret like that. And I think if you treat people with respect, they treat you with respect. And I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Hi. So in helping to arm us to be able to educate others, I'm going to ask the devil's advocate question. I'm firmly voting yes on 3. Okay, there's no question about that. However, as I speak with others, I either imagine or fear the opinion that we live in a society and culture which for years and years has functioned well in a binary gender system. And now we are being asked to spend extra time, energy, tension to create spaces that will be uncomfortable for a lot of people, regardless of whether they have good reason or bad reason. They will be uncomfortable. It will be extra cost for a very small number of people. And is it fair to ask society to do that with this law? And so I'm looking for, I have one personal response to that, but I'm really looking for stronger and better responses.
That's a big question. But I think one thing is that trans people have always existed. We've always been here. And that it's actually not really for, I say they as the cisgender folks, right? It's actually not for their comfort, it's for mine. It's that my rights are protected as a human being, and that I don't get questioned, I don't get harassed. And I have been harassed and thrown out of bathrooms, right? And I think that the thing is that it's really not about that. I'm not asking for their comfort. I'm asking to not be discriminated against. I'm asking to not be assaulted. And to have the law on my side, that everybody deserves to be respected. Like, I respect really hateful people. I will respect you, but I'm asking for the same respect back. And the big thing too is that, yes, this is, the opposition is talking about bathrooms, and that this law does not say that then bad things can now happen in bathrooms. That will still be illegal. Assault will still be illegal in bathrooms or locker rooms, right? It's not saying that then it's just a free-for-all in there. That's not the case. So it's really about making sure that people are protected and that the people who are marginalized feel more comfortable. It's actually not about cisgender people's comfort.
Just to add a couple of things to that, I think this is a moment for us to say without inhibition that our society needs to be oriented towards humanity as opposed to power. And that question to me is about power. Things have been functioning very well for people who've had power. And for many of the movements for justice, be it the liberation of women, or be it really every single movement has made an ask on the society to adjust itself so that everyone gets to be full human beings. And that's good. And I think we just have to go for that without any inhibitions. And in this moment in particular, stand up for that.
For those who are used to be discriminated against, equality feels like liberation. And so it's coming up because of people who've never felt uncomfortable going to the bathroom. Bathrooms need to be safe. I just wanted to add one thing from a Jewish tradition, not that these aren't, but scripturally there's a wonderful narrative between Jacob and Rachel and Leah. And one is supposed to marry Jacob, Rachel, and she gives over these signs to her sister in order that she shouldn't be embarrassed. And the commentators ask, well, that's great that she wants to be sensitive to her sister, but what about to Jacob, right? He's getting duped in the process. And the commentators, the Chazon Ish in particular, says, that just like it was Rachel's responsibility to make sure that Leia was protected, it was also Jacob's responsibility. He just didn't have the agency to do it. And so we are all responsible in making bathrooms safe. And if it comes to the expense of the people who have never had to worry about it, in order that other people shouldn't also have to worry about it, right? That is our responsibility. And especially, we should feel uncomfortable with our privilege, right? We should feel really uncomfortable that we don't have to think about this. And so deeply within, I think, the rabbinic tradition, we are meant to kind of recognize that God sends agents to be able to work as a messenger on behalf of the communal.
So we'll answer a few of the questions that came in through the cards, if we can move to that. So we have a question of what bathroom do genderqueer people use if there is no unisex bathroom in a public place?
The one with the short lines?
True. So for me, I'm a genderqueer person. I still make that decision based on where I'm at and who I'm with. If I'm by myself, I typically don't go to the bathroom in public places that do not have this general feeling of maybe I'm safer here. So I literally make a conscious decision almost everywhere I go. And it is really uncomfortable. It's really terrible. And I'll ask my friends. You know, I'm an adult, right? Like I don't need to ask which bathroom I need to go to. But I'm like, oh, you know, what do you think about this bathroom? Okay, which one should I go to? And then it's like, okay, well, physically, I know that maybe a stereotypical cisgender woman would be intimidated by me because maybe I look strong. I don't think that's actually true. But then in a men's room, I might be considered small and that I could be physically hurt. So typically, I will go into a women's room because I know that physically I will not be assaulted. Emotionally, yes. Verbally, yes. But at least I'm not going to get beaten up. That's kind of the basic thing. But yeah, it's a conscious decision everywhere I go, or I just hold it.
Thank you. So the next question I wanted to ask is, how do I bring this up with my friends? I want to be an advocate, but I don't know how to do it without pushing my beliefs on others.
I never thought. This is not intelligent as great advice, but I feel like we're at a time and place in history where you can't be passive. Silence only helps, right, those in power. And the Talmud says, that being quiet means being complicit. If we don't stand up, we're okay with it. And so when it comes to, let's say, safe spaces, there's no well, it's not a safe space, but it's not a not safe space. I think the absence of a safe space is that it's not. And so it actually, I think, really fits down into a binary. Either we're going to be trans-inclusive or trans-exclusive. You don't get to be part of this. So you can tell. So, yeah. It wasn't that funny. It's certainly not worth explaining. And the point is... what?
Neutral.
It's neutral. You can't be neutral. You have to choose sides, right? And so for people who have, there's certain things that politically the stakes aren't great. So like whether or not you want to vote on certain things is like the stakes aren't high. The stakes here are really high. And as part of a nation that has a national heritage and story and inheritance of being oppressed and being denied access to places, the Hebrew Bible is filled with remembrances that we were dehumanized in Egypt. We were enslaved in Egypt. Like, we know what it feels like. And the people alive today who are dehumanized. And so to not stand up for this, or to be ambivalent, like, I don't know, you think we should stand up for other people or not? I don't know. Well, we know what happens. The never again is now, right? The idea that as a kid, I saw these movies and went to these museums and heard the stories and read the books, and I hated it. I resented it as a kid. Like, I lived in a safe space. And it's only now that some of this stuff, especially on immigration, is so visceral, and I've seen this before. Like, the idea that never forget isn't just that we should remember, that we should recognize it to prevent it from happening again. And so, like, in circles where it's not comfortable to talk about it, then we need to be uncomfortable and talk about it. So we can bring this up by saying, hey, you know, there's this vote, and this is what I'm thinking. So I think we need to lead by example, we're before the vote, and so like we're empowered. We have the opportunity to do something. To talk about this the day after is too late.
Very good advice. We have another question in the audience?
There was more of a kind of a statement of, you know, thank you all for being here. And I have worked with Mimi on the Yes on 3 campaign, and I really do appreciate this. As a trans woman, I came up here from Virginia, and I've been doing this for about 3 years. I really do appreciate the support, and I do understand how hard it is, and I know how hard it was for my son to see me about 2 years ago. But I've been very blessed that most of my family does support me, including Mom. So I do have to really give that. I do feel for you, sorry about that. But yeah, I do feel that threat sometimes about, you know, can I go into a certain bathroom? Although here I haven't had an issue that, you know, when I came up here and I saw the questions, I was like, what happened? So I do really think that, yes, we really do need to go out there and tell everybody and really make a point of just how critical this is. I mean, because this is life and death for us.
Thank you. It really is just mind-blowing that we, how long it already exists for human rights. And now we're voting to take it away. It just shouldn't be this way. It really shouldn't. So we have a question on the card that actually is asking about language. And I think that's very, very important when we understand vocabulary and words that might be new for us. And so Irene has put together an amazing handout. So if you did not get this, please make sure we have plenty of copies to take some. And maybe you can take a couple extra. And in your conversation, as you talk about the voting, you can certainly share this. And so one of the questions was, what does cisgender mean? And so that's actually the last definition on the bottom, spelled CISGENDER, that's one word. A person who is comfortable in the gender they were assigned at birth. Does anyone else want to say anything about cisgender?
As someone who's identifies as cis, after doing this for a few years, I haven't actually made much progress in understanding gender at all. And I think for cis folks, the most evolved space that we can be is to know that we just don't know. Like, how do you, like, when somebody in my family transitioned and said, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy, I said, I know I'm a boy, how do you know that you're a boy, right? And so it's in that space that really separates us. And so I think just coming with a lot of humility and with a posture of humility and listening, like that's what it means to me to be cis, is to recognize that there's so much that I don't understand. And that's actually not that important when it comes to listening to the needs of another. That it doesn't have to make sense to us in order for us to be supportive. So I think for part of being cis means to listen.
Absolutely.
I would just add that why should, quote, they have the names? Why can't we be something too? If everybody who isn't like us has a title, but we don't have a title, we who are cisgender, then we are inherently othering nonetheless, no matter how open we are. So to be able to define ourselves, just as everyone else is forced to be defined, equalizes us. Yeah.
Great point.
Sorry, just, yes, and that's why it's so important for cis folks to also name our pronouns and to use words like identify. I identify as a male. That doesn't mean that it's not a world of make-believe, that somebody might think about somebody who wasn't born that way. But really, to identify means this is how I see myself, and it's just as real for me as it is for everybody else.
Sorry. No, I quit. Paul,
Yeah. I actually have a question.
you want to take a mic?
Yeah, sure. Has that ever actually happened that a trans person attacked a woman in a bathroom? Is this a solution desperately in search of a problem?
Correct. That has never happened. Ever. That's just... I'm done. Sorry, no.
The only thing to add to that is that the No on Three folks are sort of trotting out examples where they say that this has happened. I'm happy to speak to sort of specific examples offline, but in every case, nobody is claiming to be trans when they assault a person in a restroom.
Well, you know, and it's interesting. I was talking to my son about this and about this event and the vote, and he was like, Mom, people can do that right now. So what are we doing?
So I just have a couple comments. One is, equality is not like a pie. Just because you get less doesn't mean somebody gets more. So I think to think of this issue, it's not just because you are allowing someone the respect and dignity to use the bathroom of their gender. It doesn't mean that, as we were talking before, that you're getting any less. And maybe we need women to design bathrooms, because it does seem like there are always more men's stalls than women's stalls. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, Sawyer, sorry, he's a dear friend of mine. But it occurred to me that as we're talking about this, a lot of times we're all speaking to the choir. We have friends who agree with us, and so those aren't the people that I need to reach out to. The people that I need to reach out to are people who either aren't going to vote, and I really want them to get out to vote, even if they just vote for this one issue, because it's very important to me and my family. But we did a training recently for an event, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, because there was something that you did at the training where you asked people, do you know someone who's trans? And so I'm just wondering if maybe you share that as a way to get people to think about who they know in their lives who are trans.
Yeah, so I did a training at the hotel where our gala was going to be held. And by Out Metro West, our biggest fundraiser of the year, it was a couple weeks ago. It was really successful. And we've had issues in bathrooms at our own fundraisers. So I was like, nope, not gonna do that anymore, I'm all set. So I went in and trained some of their staff and their management. And really, when I say train, it was more of this, it was more of a conversation. I gave them a little bit of the 101, kind of, this is what transgender means, this is what cisgender means, this is what gay means, just so that they were like, okay, we're all on the same page, great. And I did, I asked the question, who do you know that's trans? One person said, I think, Ryan. I was like, oh, Ryan. I was like, oh, okay, who's Ryan? I was like, Ryan Salins, he's a trans author. He was like, no, my friend. And I was like, oh, great, cool. I don't know all the trans people in the world, but I think he's like, oh yeah, you know Ryan. Like, oh yeah, we go way back. I don't actually know any trans Ryans, but it's totally fine. So, and I was like, okay, let's keep on going. And so we went through the general list. And the first person is Caitlyn Jenner. That people will say, okay, I know she's trans. Great, awesome. The really amazing thing at that is that then nobody mispronounced her. So when I say mispronouncing, so nobody said the person formerly known as Bruce Jenner, right? Or, oh, he used to be a man and now he's a woman. That's not right either, right? So that they continue to use the name Caitlin and use the pronouns of she, her, hers, because those are her pronouns. And then we're just kind of going through the list, and I was like, Chaz Bono, Laverne Cox, Janet Mock, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I know these people. I'm like, and you know one more? Would you? Like, me. Hi. I'm trans, and I'm underneath the trans umbrella by identifying as genderqueer. And they're like, oh, great, I know one more person. And I don't know if this is what you're getting at, is that now you know two people. We're not best friends, no, but you have a face, you have a story behind it. And that talking to your friends about it, like, I heard a trans person speak, and guess what? They're just like you and me. They have jobs, they have families, they have pets, they need to go to the bathroom. Right? Like, that's part of just the general conversation that we're getting, is that I'm literally the same as you. I just identify differently, just as you identify differently for me. So you know more trans people than you think, and now you know two more.
We have time for one more question. Looks like right here. Thank you.
I wonder if some of the intensity has to do with fear, particularly not of trans people, but often we find when something upsetting happens, we blame the marginalized people. We hear about clergy, teachers, coaches who have assaulted or abused people. I mean, that's what's in the news. People who are famous movie stars. And I wonder if it's sometimes easier for us in sudden shock of seeing all these people who we revered doing such strange behavior to blame the marginal person. And I'm wondering if this is in some ways, though it's very difficult to have a referendum, a chance to educate people and for us to learn. We've seen so often when there's been a change or revolution, there's been a counter-revolution. And I don't know if it's something you want to react to or not.
I actually do think that the fear is misplaced, and thereby trans people are being penalized for the actions of non-trans people. And that, I think, is the misjustice that you're getting at. Because I don't know any trans person that would go into a transgender woman that would go into a ladies' room and do any of the things that people are afraid they would do. So the people that want to say no, they say, well, then we need to get rid of that law that protects those people, because there's other people that aren't trans that we're afraid of, and this law protects them, but we don't care. So it's kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And that's a little misplaced, and I think it's wrong. I mean, if there's an issue that someone has saying no, bring up the issue, the real issue. And don't attach it to people that aren't really the problem. That's what I think.
And I think it's also emblematic of something that we're seeing much more broadly. For those who don't have the most entitlement, the most privilege, straight, white, cis, Christian men, but they're not at the bottom, there's often tension of, now that I'm not at the bottom, do I want to just align with the oppressors, because then I'll be making good company? Or do I want to ally up and really make sure that those people who I do have more privilege and agency, then I can share that wealth and network my resources to provide theirs. And so there is a super majority of people who I don't think are in a place of fear for themselves, but are in a place of fear of aligning with others that might knock them down in the way in which they perceive the hierarchy of progress in this country. It's part of that hyper-nationalism, it's part of the white nationalism, white supremacy, it's very much part of all the sneakiness that we're seeing. And not to be too political, but there are people that we would think wouldn't possibly be okay with certain things that we're seeing, but they're in that middle space and they're absolutely aligning with people because then they're not there. And I think that's part of having the courage to recognize that we have the capacity, each one of us, to be an ally for others, and instead of being selfish and hoarding the things that we have those to be able to help those who are less fortunate.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We are, again, thank you to the panel, and I wanted to introduce Ann Marlanza, who's going to come up and close us out.
So I'm a member here of Temple Beth Elohim, and I'm also Vice President of the League of Women Voters of Wellesley. I want to thank all our speakers here tonight for honoring us with your stories and with your expertise. You have led us in a discussion that's moved our community to a new level of understanding, and we really appreciate that. Thank you. I also want to acknowledge all the volunteers that helped us plan this evening, particularly my committee here at TBE, with Eileen Pincus, Liz Thoreen, Sophie Hansen, Marcia Merkin, and Amy Benjamin, and the many volunteers that helped us tonight in various ways. When I look around this room, my spirit is lifted by the fact that you cared enough about your neighbors to come take part in this conversation. We are a group that came together from the four corners of our community, and it's only through conversations like this one that we are participating in, all of us, that we can understand each other and join together to face the challenges of our world. Thank you for being here. Additionally, I want to acknowledge the civic community leaders who are here tonight. From the Board of Selectmen here in Wellesley, we have Marjorie Fryman and Jack Morgan, and I appreciate you being here, as well as Linda Child from the School Committee and Raymond McManus from the Natural Resources Commission. And I also want to give a shout out actually to our two state senators and to our state representative who represent us, all of whom support the current protections for transgender individuals. We're grateful for your presence and support because your commitment to maintaining dignity for the citizens of Massachusetts sends a message across Wellesley and across our Commonwealth that all are welcome here. As we developed this program, we heard from people who were concerned about taking a stand on a political issue. Well, I feel very strongly that this is not a political issue. It's a human rights issue. This is about how we choose to treat our neighbors, our family members, our co-workers, our students. Yes, it is legislation that we use to ensure the rights of our citizens, but that doesn't make this political. It doesn't matter who you voted for in the last election or who you intend to vote for on November 6th. We might disagree on many different issues, but the value of Tselem Elohim, that we are all created in God's image, that we have respect for human differences, that we believe in dignity and respect for all individuals, this is something shared across our community, from Temple Beth Elohim all the way to the other end of town, the Village Church, and from the Wellesley Public Schools up to the highest levels of our government. So if you feel inspired by what you've heard tonight and you want to show support for your transgender neighbors, there are a number of actions that you can take. When you arrived here tonight, you were given a yellow card, which lists suggested actions. Can everybody take out your card and hold it up? If you don't have one, we can give you one on your way out. Take a look at the card now and consider taking one of the actions on the card. What action is right for you? You can decide that. There are many ways that you can support your neighbors. Do you want to talk to or email 5 friends? Do you want to take part in a phone bank? Or can you simply commit to continuing your education into the challenges of being transgender in our society? Any of these actions makes a difference. Please fill out this card, and it will be collected as you leave the sanctuary tonight. We're asking you to make a commitment to do something. We hope that this community conversation is just the start of our discussion. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and don't forget to vote on November 6th. Whatever actions that you do decide to take, I really do hope that you will join me and the League of Women Voters in voting yes on ballot question 3 and protecting the human dignity of all. Now I'd like to turn the podium over to Reverend Dr. Kelly Murphy Mason of the Unitarian Universal Society of Wellesley Hills to close us out.
What a wonderful evening this has been. Thank you everyone for participating in this lively and timely conversation on transgender equality. Special thanks go out to our panelists tonight for their courage and honesty. It's particularly gratifying when different faith communities can collaborate on important issues such as this one. My congregation, UU Wellesley Hills, is so proud to have co-sponsored this event with our generous host, Temple Beth Elohim, along with Keshet, the Village Church, St. Andrews, Wellesley Hills Congregational Church, the Wellesley Friends Meeting, and the several other very worthy civic organizations here tonight. We all want people to be better informed about and more deeply committed to protecting the rights of transgender persons, most immediately in Massachusetts, and then more widely across this country. These days, we know to expect a powerful backlash against progressive gains made more recently in our society. We also know to hold our ground, push back, and then press ahead. That's what we must do on question 3. That's what we will do. We will do it together. In Unitarian Universalist congregations like ours in Wellesley Hills, we have a couple of mottos that are serving us well these days. We declare that we believe love is love, and that all genders are whole, holy, and good. These are articles of faith for us, and we affirm all people and their freedom of gender expression. So many of you also affirm this from the sources of your own faith and from your personal belief in the potential for human goodness. Yes, love is love. And we love our queer neighbors as ourselves because we are they and they are we. Time-honored wisdom from the world's religions keeps reminding us of this, that we are all one, and we keep forgetting. So we begin again in love, always in love. I hope tonight marks our once more starting out together, trusting that we are not alone in this work. May the generous spirit of it be our benediction and a blessing to all we encounter while doing it. So may it be. Amen.
Hi.